The following is a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
Now, Gerald, I know you have great personal experience with lysergic acid. What do you think of it?
To do that in 2 minutes, eternity in an hour, it's almost impossible, of course, as all the patients say, to describe it. You can only say it isn't, it isn't, it isn't, trying to tell people what it is. Well, of course, I don't know any of our friends that have taken it but haven't said this one thing in common. I never knew anything like that in the whole of my life. And 1 or 2 people have said to me, that's what death is going to be like. And oh, what fun it will be.
Welcome to the System is Down.
The question of the day is, psychedelics, are they good? Are they bad? Let me know. Of course, there's a stigma around them. Can they be scary? Sure. Are they misunderstood? Yeah. Can they be abused? Of course. But so can cupcakes, candy, and Twinkies. However, I've never heard about somebody eating a Twinkie and having a spiritual enlightenment and seeing the face of God. So maybe, just maybe, there's something that we're not understanding here, and maybe the stigma needs to be looked into a little bit further. What's up, Downers? Welcome back to the least comfortable show on the web. The System is Down. My name is Dan Smots, and if you're new here, go find the person who invited you and drop acid with them. Do some psychedelics, I suppose, because that's what we're talking about today. This is a topic that is touchy for some because of the stigma around it, because it's still illegal and all that. But somebody who thinks that stigma is completely unfounded is the great Mike Brancatelli from the Mikeadelic podcast, who is my guest on the show today. And he talked about his background, how he got into psychedelics, his latest ayahuasca trip, and a bunch more. And we're going to get into that in just a second. But before we do, I got to remind you guys, if you have not already joined the Downers Club, then now's your chance. The Downers Club is our patron program, as most of you know, if you've been paying attention. It is our patron program that keeps the show going, keeps me doing this nonsense every single week for you. And you can join it for less than a cup of coffee a month and get hours and hours and hours of bonus audio content. And you'll also get to join our bonus group forum that is just for Downers Club members. But in order to do that, in order to be a part of the show, to be a part of something greater than yourself, you got to go over to tsidpod.com/support. Get over there, get in here, make yourself useful. tsidpod.com/support and join the Downers Club. All right, here's my conversation with the great Mike Brancatelli. Let's get weird. My guest today is podcaster, stand-up comedian, artist, educator, Mike Brancatelli. Mikey Branks, how's it going, man?
Hey, how you doing? Wow, that was a hell of a bio. I don't know if I deserve all those credentials, but I'll take them. Thank you.
Yeah, I ripped it straight from your bio, so, if you're talking yourself up, more power to you.
Oh, man. Yeah, well, thanks for having me, Dan. It's good to be here.
Absolutely. Thanks for coming on. Our mutual friend, Mark Clare from Lions of Liberty, actually alerted me to your story, said that you were looking for a podcast to come on, talk about your latest ayahuasca experience. So we're going to get into that a little bit later. But first, for new people on the show, I like to dig a little bit into like your history and your upbringing, even if it's not necessarily related to the main topic that we're talking about. But I like to just, hear where people come from. So where are you from?
From New York. Grew up outside of New York City in the suburbs. Suburban white kid life, really privileged, super privileged.
Sure.
I went to school in Arizona and California and then Buffalo. So I had a bit of a Van Wilder college experience. I never really wanted to be there, but just stuck it out and got the damn degree, the meaningless piece of paper for nothing. Because I eventually started doing stand-up comedy, like you mentioned, in New York. Did that for a little while, and I don't know. Then now I'm here. I've been traveling around and drinking all kinds of different plant medicines and psychedelics, and now I find myself sitting back in New York. So yeah,
nice, sure. What was kind of your family as far as like politics or maybe religion, stuff like that? Like, did they have any foundations that you can speak to?
Yeah, definitely. So yeah, it's interesting. You know, it's like where you grow up. I mean, you don't really get to choose. You don't really get to know any other sort of ways of life. So like being born in New York, it's kind of like default Democrat. You know, like blue
Sure.
state. Like so. Yeah, my parents are like Democrats, and they're very Catholic. There's actually kind of like a rare breed. They're conservative Democrats.
Hmm.
Yeah.
How does that work exactly?
They're just like good church going folk who
Sure.
vote, who are teachers. So,
Right.
you know, public school teachers, and, you know, vote Democrat every year, every election year.
So conservative in that they're Christians.
Christians and sort of, you know, button down sort of folk, you know, they definitely aren't like me, who's like pretty radical on the fringe, you know, exploring different sorts of things. They're pretty, you know, they're pretty just like, yeah, I don't know, tucked in, I guess you would say. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, I hear you. I had a similar upbringing, but aside from the Democrat part, but we live in Illinois, so you don't get that. But so when did you start getting into like the psychedelics and plant medicines, that type of thing?
Yeah, really, actually, it didn't happen. I mean, I kind of just like messed around when I was in like high school and stuff, you know, you just like drinking, smoking weed and just doing stuff like at parties and stuff like that. But it was all sort of just like, you know, without any intention or without any purpose. Really, it wasn't until 2012. 2012 was like a huge year for me where, like I had started discovering libertarianism. I started discovering, you know, this guy, Ron Paul. I was like paying attention to him when he started to make that run again in 2012. And right around the same time, I just happened to be at like a music festival, and I took a large amount of LSD for the first time. And I had really like a eye-opening experience, and the two kind of like came together in this like weird way that like I was like, man, like what all this stuff is like coming together for me. Like it sounds pretty crazy. Like I don't have anyone to talk to about it or whatever. And then slowly I discovered people. Like I started to discover like a lot of libertarian thinkers, and then I started to discover a lot of like psychedelic sort of pioneers, you know, just going on YouTube and listening to lectures by Terrence McKenna or people like Alan Watts or Graham Hancock, listening to Joe Rogan's podcast, listening to him talk about float tanks and DMT and all this stuff. And so, yeah, it was right around 2012 when like the floodgates had opened for everything, for all this new stuff to come into my life.
Absolutely. It seems like liberty and libertarianism has a way of bringing a lot of the most interesting people in society together, like me and conspiracies and all that stuff, and you with psychedelics. And we meet somewhere in the middle with liberty. So it's great.
Yeah, exactly. I think that it's just once you sort of understand some of the core principles of what it means to be, you know, a libertarian, or what it means to embrace the ideas of liberty, it sort of just opens up a whole new realm to you of possibility, where it's like, oh wow, like there's a lot of things that they haven't been telling us. What else haven't they been telling us, you know?
Right. Now, with that first experience that you speak of, the LSD trip, I assume it was a good trip. You want to get into that a little bit on like what it was that made you go, well, that's great. That's where my life's going from now on.
Yeah, it was an amazing trip. It was so I mean, I guess like much like you, I'm sure we're probably around the same age. Like I grew up with like the, you know, if you take LSD, you're going to jump off a bridge and die, you know,
Right.
like all this stuff is terrible for you, you know? So there was always this sort of like lingering unconscious fear in the back of my mind. Like I was like, well, I think weed is okay. Mushroom seems okay. You know, so I would do some things like recreationally in small doses, but I happened to go to the Coachella Music Festival in 2012. Last minute, I had like some friends friends of mine that I went to school with at Arizona ASU. They were like, "We got an extra ticket. You got to come." And I just happened to be in a place in my life where I was like, you know what, I'm gonna go. And I was reading the biography of Steve Jobs at the time. I'm pretty sure he just passed away or something. And so yeah, I was really getting into his biography by Walter Isaacson. And something that really stuck out to me in that biography was Steve Jobs said that taking LSD was the most important experience of his life. And that kind of like clicked in my head. And I was like, well, that's really interesting because this guy's like a really successful entrepreneur. You know, I obviously am a big fan of like his products and the way that he does business and things. So maybe there's something to this. I don't know. You know, maybe there's something that they're not telling us, which of course is the case. So I was at this music festival and my friends like ran up to me with these like furry hats on that like had like animal heads on them. And like, we were at like Mike Snow, like some band. And they were like, you got to take this. It's the best stuff we've ever had. Like, you know, whatever. So I'm like, okay. I was primed for it. Like I was in a good mind state. I felt like I felt like there was enough credibility that had been given to it now because of the Steve Jobs thing, that I was like, well then, yeah, I mean, if geniuses take this, then it's right for me. So I took it and it was just like pure bliss. I mean, it was just like pure euphoria, pure bliss. It just felt like everything was amazing. You know, all the stereotypical things that you hear from people that are tripping on psychedelics. Everything is love and we're all connected and everything's one and all this stuff. And it really did feel like that. It just felt like the most amazing time ever. It felt like I was in like paradise for 3 days. So yeah, it just kind of opened me up and I was like, wow, well, you know, this is something that I want to explore more of, you know?
Right. Yeah, we act like psychedelics are like invented by EDM hipsters in order to make kids jump out of high-story windows or something like that. I mean, Steve Jobs, and he's not the only one, right? There's been other like top-name minds who have, you know, come out saying I owe a lot of it to these psychedelics.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, the person who discovered the DNA double helix, Francis Crick, admitted to taking LSD. Aldous Huxley, one of the greatest minds and authors of our times. Many people, you know, credit psychedelics with kind of widening their perspective and opening their minds to thinking in different ways. So yeah, once I had that experience, I came home and I just started to just dig in and do like research, you know, like I started looking up, well, who invented LSD and where was it? You know, Albert Hofmann invented it in 1943. Funny enough, LSD was invented the same year that the nuclear bomb was invented. So, you know, you have two different paths of humanity there being invented at the same time, but
right.
But yeah, and then, you know, I was looking at, okay, they were doing this stuff at Harvard. You know, they were conducting experiments at Harvard with Richard Alpert, who later became Ram Dass, and Timothy Leary and Ralph Metzner and all these guys who are well-credentialed Ivy League scholarly guys. Stanford experiments, and then, you know, later you get into like CIA and all this stuff. And it's really mind-blowing when you go down this rabbit hole. I mean, it's no wonder why they keep this information from you, because they don't want you to, you know, and when I say they, I mean, you know, kind of like the mainstream public school system.
Hey, you're talking to a conspiracy guy. You can say they all you want. It's fine.
Yeah, all right, nice. Yeah, so yeah, I mean, it's just it's kept from us, obviously, because, you know, when you discover this stuff, it's very empowering to yourself. It's very empowering to the individual, and it promotes unconventional ways of thinking, and, you know, that's not really good for the status quo.
Right. And not only that, but things like ayahuasca and mushrooms. I mean, it's not like our culture invented those, that these were used as medicines, right, in other cultures historically.
Yeah, I mean, historically, you know, participating in ceremonies that promote altered states of consciousness were regarded as like the greatest gift of the gods. You know, I mean, the Greeks had this place called Eleusis, which was like, you know, this retreat center, if you will, available for anyone who was born in Greece to go. I think it was a 9-month like initiation thing called the Eleusinian Mysteries, and they served something called kykeon there, which was like later to be found, I think, mushrooms. There's like pictures of them with like on tablets with kind of long stem looking things that they're handing off to each other. Mm-hmm. So, you know, it's these traditions, these sorts of like rites of passage or initiation rituals, these ceremonial rituals of people coming together, gathering together, drinking some kind of brew, or going into some kind of ecstatic dance or some kind of breathing technique that brings them out, have been practiced for you know, since the dawn of time, since humans have been coming together and forming communities. Yeah.
Right. Yeah, and you mentioned, well, you said it's no wonder why they the they try and keep it from us. Do you think that there's more to it? Do you think that there is some sort of conspiracy or something that is causing this to still be an illegal substance, criminalized?
Oh yeah, definitely. I mean, without a doubt. I think, obviously, if you look at what these things can do, if you look at what simply ingesting something can do for a person in the proper set and setting, with the proper context, with the proper guidance, and the proper people to kind of like, usher in the correct sort of wisdom that goes along as a component to these plant medicines or these psychedelics or whatever compounds you're using. Yeah, definitely. I mean, the powers that be are not stupid. There's a lot of people, I think, that think, oh, these knuckleheads in Congress, they just can't get it done. What's wrong with them? No. They know. They've been down this road before, and they know when you give people the right to have direct experiences, that when there's nothing mediating. When there's no mediation in between an individual and something else that's providing information, when it's just you having a felt direct experience from yourself, and you coming into your own authority and your own experience, yeah, that's dangerous. So I definitely think that they are, definitely trying to keep this away from people as much as possible. Yeah.
Sure. Now, do you have any like religious thoughts now? Like, where do you stand on that type of thing? Because I know a lot of people take mushrooms or do ayahuasca or all these things to try and heighten their spiritual experiences and find their creator and that type of thing. Is that anywhere? Like, are you anywhere in that sphere, or is it more just finding of yourself?
Yeah, I think that. I think it's really it's up to the individual. I think I'm not I actually used to be like a pretty militant like atheist. Like I was a big like Christopher Hitchens fan, and I just love the way that he like smacked people down and all this kind of stuff. And I think that just had something to do with my religious upbringing, where it was kind of forced upon me, and there was that like teenage angst, rebellion sort of thing.
Right.
Like I got out of that, and now I think that religion is is actually an important glue that holds people together, and that can, create a bonding between people. I'd much rather have people voluntarily enter into a religious practice, or, a psychedelic practice or something like that, some spiritual practice, than being forced to worship at the altar of the state. That's something that I fear. I think that's worse. But for me personally, yeah, I mean, it definitely puts me in contact with the divine, whatever that is. I don't think it's easy to put a finger on it, but it's there. It's there. It's something transcendent, something more powerful than what I am.
So you do think that there is something outside of yourself that is tying all this stuff together?
Possibly. I mean, it's really, really difficult. I mean, the kinds of experiences that I've had, it just leads me to believe that we live in like a paradox. It's very paradoxical. I think that there is maybe something that's kind of out there that holds everything together. That's some kind of powerful sort of force, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But I also do think that like a large portion of power and a large portion of the perception that we have of reality comes from ourselves.
Sure. Now, have you gotten like kickback? You have your podcast, Mikeadelic, which digs into all these things. Have you gotten kickback for? Because I mean, basically, well, not even basically, we are literally talking about something that is still completely illegal in this country, and you're. I mean, we make light of it, which I agree that it should be made light of, but most people, of course, don't feel the same way. Have you gotten a lot of kickback because of that?
Yeah, I mean, sure. It definitely happens. And there's definitely, from time to time, I have like a little sort of sense of creeping fear that comes in to my head. Like, oh shit, like the feds are going to kick down my door and just drag me away, and no one's going to hear from me ever again.
I hear you.
But I don't know. I just feel that, yeah, I mean, I just try and do what I do, and just always speak from a place of truth. And I don't know, maybe if I overstep my boundaries, if I'm outspoken about something that I don't really know about, and someone corrects me, I'm always willing to, admit that I was wrong, or have a dialogue with someone, or a discussion with someone, or a debate with someone. I mean, I'm very open. Like I'm not very set in any ways that, I feel militant about or anything like that. So, yeah, I'm just open to foster a dialogue with anyone who wants to, and people who are just like hating on me or whatever, or, giving me kickback. It's just like, hey, whatever.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. Now, with your family being more, conservative religious upbringing, do they have issue with it, or even friends that you grew up with?
Yeah, I mean, I think, it's interesting. It's like when you hear about this sort of stuff and you don't really know the thought process of the person behind what's going on, it's pretty quick to like judge and dismiss, and to have sorts of set feelings about it, right? Like, so my parents at first were probably like, well, this is bad, this is clearly bad, or
right.
something.
Mike took LSD at Coachella or whatever, and now he's starting a podcast about drugs. Real cool.
Yeah, yeah. He's crazy. This, what's he doing? He's not settling down. He's gallivanting all over the globe. He's doing all these crazy things. But once I talked to them, I talked to my dad. My dad's a really intelligent guy, even though he's a devout Catholic, like works at the church and everything. I'm really fortunate that he's open-minded enough where I'm able to have like really deep intellectual conversations with him about the nature of the universe and reality and who we are and where we come from and these sorts of things. And he disagrees with me, and I disagree with him, but we still are able to talk. And I think that's I'm really fortunate to have that. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And I mean, you said you had a stint of time where you were, a hardcore atheist. So, I mean, you kind of came back a little bit, right? You're meeting him somewhere in the middle.
I think he's pretty happy about that. Yeah. I think he's pretty happy about that. He's definitely happy to hear my discourse change more, leaning towards divinity and spirituality, and even, quoting the Bible and things like this at times. I definitely owe a little bit of that to the work of Jordan Peterson, who really shed light of the biblical stories that we can really extract like some meaning out of these things that apply to our lives today. And it doesn't have to be interpreted in this like ideological, fanatical way.
Sure. Yeah. Absolutely. So let's get into this latest ayahuasca trip. Tell me everything. Tell me the full story. Was this your first time doing it?
No, this is my second trip down there. I went to this retreat center when I felt like I really needed something. Like, I was always interested in ayahuasca, and I was I knew it was a big deal, and I knew it wasn't something that you like mess around with. I've heard a lot of stories and I've read a lot about it, and I did a ton of research before going.
Yeah, real quick, not to interrupt, but I personally don't know a whole lot about it. I know that it's extremely potent. I mean, pretty much the main that I know of it is from Chelsea Handler's show when she went down there and did, which, I mean, that's entertainment. So could you, like, I'm sure a lot of people aren't that familiar with it. Could you give, what that is that we're talking about?
Sure. Yeah. So ayahuasca is considered to be a master plant, or a master psychedelic compound brew. It's actually a combination of two different plants. There's an ayahuasca root, and then there's the plant called chacruna, which holds the active compound DMT. DMT is dimethyltryptamine. It's the most potent psychedelic on the planet. It's a complete mystery to people. I mean, we're just starting to do some research on this stuff now. I think the Royal Imperial College of London is starting to do some like brain scan imaging tests on DMT patients.
Starting to do tests on it now, but it's illegal. Just, that's how things work. Don't know what it is, but don't do it.
Some people are able to fight to get like research credentials or research permits to do this stuff, which is really great because, I mean, at least it's a foot in the door, right? I mean, I kind of stand on the ground of like, well, it's my body, it's my choice. It's like my moral right to ingest whatever I choose to put in my body. But I mean, that doesn't really get so far in Congress. So, but yeah, the research testing and things like that are good. So, this doctor, Dr. Rick Strassman, actually wrote a book called DMT, the Spirit Molecule, and there's a Netflix documentary with Joe Rogan, who hosts it. It's all about DMT and what it what it does. And smoking DMT is actually completely different than drinking ayahuasca. Smoking DMT is like being shot out of a cannon, being shot out of a cannon on the back of a rocket, and flying to the moon. It's a completely different thing. It lasts about 5 minutes long. It produces this insane, visual effect of you being in like another dimension of the reality. Ayahuasca is a brew. Like I said, the combination of two different plants, the ayahuasca vine and the chacruna plant. It's a brew that's indigenous to the Amazon rainforest. It's been used by shamans, by healers or curanderos, ayahuasqueros, people who study these plants and work with them traditionally in ceremony. And they've been doing it for, I suppose, 1,000 years or so, something like that. It's a very old shamanic practice. And essentially the way that these shamans learn about these plants is to ingest them. So, I don't know how they found out that you mix, out of all the thousands and thousands of plants in the Amazon rainforest, like how did they come upon like, oh, let's mix this vine with this plant and then we'll get this,
Right. But in fairness, who was the first person to try cow's milk too? Like, oh, that looks good. I'll try that.
Right. I mean, let's give it up for these pioneers
right.
who just bravely ingested things that we never would have.
Somebody's got to try it.
Someone's got to take the risk to do it. So,
right.
So yeah, it's a brew. It's an awful, disgusting tasting brew that it tastes like old socks and mud and dirt and just nastiness. And you take about a shot glass of this thing, and you sit in something called a maloka, which is like a circular sort of teepee hut. It usually takes about maybe an hour or so to kick in, and it produces very intense psychedelic effects, very intense visual, all sensory effects, like, you just sort of get an information download. You get like
if it takes an hour to kick in, my EDM concert's going to be over by the time it gets there.
Yeah, you do not want to be at an EDM concert around this thing. You want to be in a. So the shamans, the healers that are administering this brew, they actually sing songs. So they sing indigenous plant songs called Icaros, and the Icaros are their healing medicine songs, which are really beautiful and really nice when you're sitting in a ceremony like this. Definitely not EDM. Definitely not. It's just kind of this loving, beautiful, traditional ancient music. I don't know. It's like Lord of the Rings. It's like Harry Potter. It's like it's fantasy fiction kind of stuff. It's like, you're in this kind of mystery, magical world, and and a lot of people that are going to drink ayahuasca nowadays are going to drink ayahuasca because they want to have some sort of healing. That's kind of the big sell around it right now.
Mm-hmm. Sure. So first off, how does one even arrange something like this? Like, what's the setup process for going to, what was the country that this was in?
Peru.
Peru. Okay. So how do you, this is your second time around, so you're not a noob, but like, what is the setup process? And do you take like a group, or is it just you going by yourself, or what?
Yeah. So the first time I went by myself, but luckily, I mean, it's 2018. Like, these places have websites now. They have websites. Sure. They have people that handle their social media. They're pretty teched up. It's pretty amazing. The first time I actually was thinking about going, I was like looking at some places to go, and I just didn't know anything. And luckily I found a really reputable place. It's called the Temple of the Way of Light, and they've got like they're probably one of the safest, most secure places to go. It really makes you feel very comfortable as, like this Western dude from New York who's like, hey, I'm going to go gallivanting around in the jungle with shamans. Like, they make it like where you go on their website and you check it out, and it's like, okay, like this kind of feels good. Like this feels like I'm not going to get raped and killed in the jungle,
right. While you're like unconscious.
Yeah. I mean, it's truly like a magical place. I mean, they really do a top-notch job. And so that's where I
Feel
went.
free to plug any websites that you want as we go along too.
Oh, yeah, sure. Of course. Yeah. It's great. I mean, I recommend anyone who's interested to go take a look and check it out. Yeah, because I mean, that was not my number one priority, right? It's like you're going to another country, you're leaving your home country and you're going to another country. You want to make sure that you're going somewhere where you feel like you're going to be protected and you feel like you're not going to nothing bad's going to happen to you. So that was my number one concern. And yeah, I went down there by myself, but I met people when I was there from all around the world. And surprisingly enough, it wasn't like weird hacky sack hipsters with mustaches and, psy-trance dreadlock, freaks. It was like, just like people, like moms, dads, people like old ladies. And it was like, kind of, I was like, really? Wow, this is interesting. Yeah. So, and from all around the world, people from all different countries coming together. It was a really, really cool thing.
Sure. Yeah. Now, you said that a lot of people do it these days for like healings and things like that. Are you talking about physical healings or more like mental, emotional, spiritual type healings?
Yeah, I think all kinds of healings. I think a lot of people, especially people who have, treatment resistant problems, treatment resistant PTSD or treatment resistant depression, things where they've gone through the normal channels to try and get healing, right? Like, for example, I was just in this retreat where a woman with bone cancer came, and she's like, look, I've been through all the whole rigmarole here in the West and in America and everything, and I've done all this stuff. And she's like, she's probably around 65 years old. She's like, this is sort of like a last resort for me. I figured I heard good things about ayahuasca. I might as well just book the trip and find out. And yeah, I mean, I saw her go through a miraculous change. And I think that there's definitely a place for, this sort of thing for anybody, for any sort of ailment that one faces. I mean, it really can help open you up to some new possibilities. If not magically healing your problem, at least gives you some perspective or shed some light on something that maybe you can do, or a new path you could take, or just a new kind of interpretation of your situation, which is a form of healing, I would say.
Sure. And now we sidetracked quite a bit into the what, how, when, and why ayahuasca. Let's get into this trip that you were on most recently. What was the process for that? Did it differ at all from the first time you went?
Yeah, definitely. So the first time I went, I went down there as a guest. I was just there participating as like someone who was on a retreat as a guest. It was amazing. But this time I actually went down there to work. So I went down there to, sort of like volunteer or work exchange program, like they call it. And, the reasoning for that was that I just felt called to like be a part of working with these amazing plant medicines and these healers and everything down there. So, yeah, I mean, it was totally different. I learned so much and made so many connections with so many amazing people, and it really transformed myself. I think, I think that I had definitely had some issues of my own to work out, and like just being down there, being in the jungle amongst like a community of individuals who are just doing one of the bravest things that I think one can do, which is like ingest this like crazy brew and just like face yourself in the mirror, like face your demons and like, try and like slay all your dragons. It's pretty fucking brave,
Yeah, for sure. Feel free to go as deep or not as you want. But you say that you had issues that you wanted to work out. Do you mind sharing what those were and how you came out of this?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, I mean, I definitely had sort of like convinced myself that that a lot of the problems or like a lot of the troubles that I was going through were, sort of like out there,
Mm-hmm.
like out in the world, which is true to a certain extent. I mean, there are things that are out of our control that affect the way that we live our lives. But I guess I'll give you one example. I mean, there's one example that comes to mind where, I had been very, very, passionate about speaking against the state, right? Like just speaking like everything is the state's fault, you know. And it's like,
Right.
I still believe that. I mean, I still believe that like they're one of the biggest like criminal organizations on the planet, and they're a terrible system that needs to be abolished and taken
Right.
down. But I had actually, something that I didn't realize that I did was I had fallen into a victimhood, like much like the social justice warrior type of people that I oppose and I criticize, of like, okay, stop playing the victim, you know, get your shit together and move on. I didn't even realize that I had fallen into victimhood, and I had actually let my life around me sort of crumble, and I had used like, well, I'm a victim of the state and I'm a victim of this society. I didn't realize that at all. And I had been like, you know, I'm doing my podcast, and I just noticed there was so much anger in what I was doing, and so much like blame and resentment and cynicism. And it's like, you know, I had neglected to, you know, clean up my room. Like I had neglected to like take care of my own house. And so this experience down there really, you know, took that one thing. It took a long time for me to like crack in that regard. So a big lesson that I got from drinking ayahuasca was to just take on more responsibility, and really just more personal responsibility, more leadership, and just ownership of myself and my issues, and confront them and take them on, and not you know, run away from them or play the victim. And it was hard to even realize that, because I was like, I didn't want to acknowledge that, you know. I was like, no, this isn't true. Like, you know, I'm like, no, I'm getting screwed over here, you know. I'm getting screwed over with taxes. I'm getting screwed over with this. And it's like, well, yeah, but you know, if I'm not even taking care of myself, and I'm not even taking care of my situation, then, you know, it's really difficult to sort of like preach that to other people, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So how does that translate for you into what you're doing differently now, as far as like taking control of, you know, your own responsibilities and not playing the victim? What does that mean for you right now?
Yeah. I mean, it just means like being less emotionally attached. You know, I think that like before I had left on this trip about 4 months ago, like I found myself just almost like a troll, like an online troll, just like
Mm-hmm.
just getting sucked into like Twitter and and just like Facebook, like arguing
And typical libertarian infighting.
yeah, just like that, all that kind of stuff. And it was like I was just like feeding this beast, and it's like, you know, I would read articles in the news and I would be like, oh, you know, like this Syria thing or this thing. And I would get really worked up about it, really like angry about it. So I let everything really affect me in like an emotional way. And, you know, I always looked at guys like, you know, Tom Woods, who I really respect. And like, I'm like, man, how does this guy really like separate himself from all the crazy stuff that's going on, and
Right.
put out so much great work? And, you know, and
He's a libertarian and a Catholic who stays calm on his show.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. And he has 4 daughters, and like, you know, it's like, how does he do it? I don't know. He must be like a robot or something. But yeah, I mean, so I think the biggest takeaway for me was just to like, not like, there's a lot of messed up stuff that's happening in the world. There's a lot of people that are out there to try and screw you. There's a lot of evil. There's a lot of just like, you know, just treacherous, like terrible people in positions of power that won't hesitate for a second to just wipe out human life. And like, you know, there's just bad shit going on.
Mm-hmm.
But it's like, if you just get, if I was like, I was allowing myself to get bogged down by all this stuff and just eat at me. So now I feel way more detached. I feel like, okay, cool. It's going on here. And then here's how I'm going to respond to it, rather than getting like sucked into it and getting all messy from it and destroying myself from it, you know, just doing destructive things, drinking excessively, or, you know, smoking too much or whatever, just not feeling good. I think that was, you know, like I want to feel good. And if I feel good, then I can actually produce good work, and I can actually make somewhat of a difference, do something. You know, if I'm getting bogged down by all this crap and attaching to it emotionally, and being, you know, reactive, right? Like just reacting out of emotions. I didn't think that was a good path. So I'm pretty happy that I was able to like work through all that stuff. And now I just, I'm really excited because I just got back a couple of days ago.
Mm-hmm.
I just did one podcast the other day. I was on this other guy's show, and then I'm going to record another one tomorrow. And I'm just really excited to begin like working again and doing this stuff again from a new place, like from a new standpoint.
Yeah. How long were you down there for?
So I was down there I was in the jungle for 3 months, and then I actually went to the mountains afterwards. So I got out of the jungle. I was there for about 2 weeks, so about 3.5 months.
Okay. Now, when you go down and you do these sessions or rituals or whatever you would call them, practices, is it something that you go down and you do once and then that's all you do, or is it something that you would have done a couple times while you're down there?
Oh yeah. So yeah, a bunch when I was down there. I mean, it was pretty much like every week. You sit in a ceremony, and they take place at night, and they usually go on for about maybe 4, 5, 6 hours, something like that.
Mm-hmm.
And yeah, and then there's a lot to be done in the days like following, from having such a intense experience. I mean, it's much like going like mountain biking or going like skydiving or something. And it's like, you do that, and then afterwards you're like, whoa, like that was crazy. What just happened? So there's a lot of
Mm-hmm.
like kind of getting back on your feet after a ceremony. Yeah.
Absolutely. Hey, Dan Smots here. I'm taking a second to interrupt myself talking to talk about myself because, I don't get paid a penny for the hours and hours that I put into creating this show for you guys in your greedy little ears, and I've got a family to feed. To make that happen, I run my own media business called Goulash Media. If you have a need in anything from video production to graphic design to audio production and beyond, you can get it all for a painfully fair price at Goulash Media. In video, I do weddings, music videos, commercials, pageants, plays, etc., etc., etc. For design, I do photo editing, album art, logos, branding, business cards, merchandise, you name it. For audio, I do engineering, production, editing, jingles, and, well, podcasts. So if you've got a media need of any kind, or if you'd just like to give a little something back and help keep my children fed, check out all the endless options at my website, goulashmedia.net. That's goulash, Goulash, media.net, where we cater to the little guy with the big vision. Okay. When you're having these experiences and you're, seeing these visions or whatever, can you explain what that actually entails, or what you're seeing? Is it something that you even can explain?
Yeah, it's you really can't explain it. I'm going to do my best to try, and I will explain, but it's so far beyond the verbal, description. It's so far beyond what language can contain. It's like,
sure.
I recommend anybody that's interested to do your research and, prepare and go to a place that's responsible and respectful and experience it for yourself and find out for yourself, because I think that's probably the best thing to do. But I'll try and explain, for me, I've had ceremony experiences that are really beautiful, that are really psychedelic and very colorful, with patterns, geometric patterns, and a sense of euphoria and ecstasy and love and all of these sorts of things that really get us going when we're really happy, and as human beings, when we get into a state of bliss and ecstasy. So I've had that experience. I've definitely had some very powerful visionary experiences, although the visionary experiences aren't necessarily the way that maybe one would think, whereas you're seeing something in front of your eyes. It's kind of more of an immersive experience. At least that's the way it is for me, where I either become something else, or I feel like I'm taken somewhere else and shown something. And many times when
so kind of more like a dream than actually watching a movie.
It's kind of like being awake in a dream. Exactly. Yeah. I don't know if you've ever had a lucid dream before, but it's kind of
all the time.
Yeah, exactly. It's like when you wake up in a dream and you're like, oh, okay, I'm dreaming right now. It feels very similar to that, except it's way more intense. It's way more present, and you have way more control of what's going on. At least I do. I got to talk from a place of I, because everybody's ayahuasca experience is different. There's very different experiences and encounters that you can have. I did have this pretty crazy past life sort of experience, which was very, very strange for me. It was I wasn't expecting this at all. I don't believe in reincarnation. I mean, I don't know maybe I do now. I'm not really sure. But I had this experience where I was like ripped back in time to ancient Egypt.
Huh.
And I was like, yeah. And I was like maybe like a slave or something in Egypt that had like escaped. And, like there was this sort of like futuristic technology like in ancient Egypt that was being used. And I was trying
Gonna
to
get into aliens here?
I mean, like, I'm not sure about if it was aliens, but there were these
Sure.
like, there were the leaders of the civilization that were like dressed in like these robes, and there were like these really tall beings with these like masks on.
Hmm.
And they were like sort of, so anyway, like they had like strung me up and like executed me in the public square.
Wow.
Yeah. So it was
Quite a lucid dream.
yeah, it was quite the dream. It was very intense. And I was like, wow, like it felt extremely real, like I was looking back at this experience. I'm like, I had lived this whole life. Like I had a wife, I had kids, like I had a job in this civilization. I remembered where I came from. I was this slave that had like risen up through the ranks in order to like get in favor with sort of like the elites of the society. And they had been like harnessing this sort of like weird, like floating orb of like, I don't know, gravitational space time. Like it was like this tool that they were using, and they were like, manipulating it, and they were, sort of like using it to do sort of like bad shit. And I had kind of like blew the lid off this. So then my punishment was to be like executed in the public square. And I remember like all these people were like, they had brought me out in this like square thing, and like my hands were tied, and I had felt this. And like the strangest thing is like I was born with this like little scar on my belly. And like there was a point in this experience where like they stuck this thing into my stomach, like right in that place, and like ripped out my guts. And like, yeah, it was really
Wow.
intense. It was really, really intense. But after the experience, I remember being like, well, that was just nuts, because it was like this weird sort of like Stargate sort of like
Right.
Egyptian thing. Like it was like this old, I knew it was past. It felt like it was in the past, but there was all this futuristic technology, and these people were like these very tall beings that were using like magical sort of powers to do something. And anyway, this is happening during an ayahuasca experience, right? Like I just drank one of the most potent psychedelics on the planet, and I'm having this experience. So I mean, who's to say if this is if this is actually like a past life memory that I'm remembering, or is it real? Is it not real? I don't know. Does it matter? Maybe not. But
I was going to ask if that actually played into any of your revelation that you need to shut the fuck up and do something. And like, you were the guy in this who was like the slave, which is kind of how you see yourself in this, not trying to like diagnose this or anything, but you're
ahead,
like this
yeah.
slave to the state and everything. And you're thinking, I need to stop playing the victim and do something about it. Do you think that played into any of that revelation at all?
Definitely. I think it definitely had something to do with that. Right. So like I was telling friends about this, and because, I'm not one of these people that is just going to think like, oh, well, this was totally a past life. Like I had a past life regression, and it was in ancient Egypt, and there were, aliens there. And so now I know that that's a fact. That's a fact that happened. I could have just concocted this from my brain. I could have just made this story up in order to like, that's ayahuasca works in a lot of ways where it shows you things in images and metaphors. It kind of dances with you. It doesn't necessarily give you the meaning like right away.
Right.
So totally. I mean, this could be some kind of concoction of a story that I need to extract some meaning out of to serve in my life. Like now, definitely.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was radical though, man. It was really intense.
Yeah. Now you say lucid dream. You say that you, in your definition of lucid dream, is that you're in a dream and you know that you're in a dream and you can do something about it. When you're going through this, do you know that it's a dream, or is it so real that you can't really determine what's real and what's not?
Yeah, I mean, yes to both. I mean, it's like like for me, I always know that I always know what I'm doing. When I'm doing, when I'm ingesting, if I'm taking a substance or something, like I know that, but.
Right.
During the experience, it felt like as real as I am here talking to you. Like it felt that real. but when it was over, I was like, oh, okay, I'm back in this Maloka here, and this was a ceremony, and this was an ayahuasca trip, and
that was
all right,
and this is
now. Exactly. Yeah, I'm back. I'm here.
Mm-hmm.
Now I have to make some sort of sense of this if I can at all. And I think that's really the key, is like, why people do psychedelics, or why I do psychedelics, is because I'm trying to go to some sort of like unconscious realm, some sort of, the realm of chaos and the realm of infinity, and just sort of like see what's going on in this world, and see if I can bring something back to help me in my life get along better and think better and do better.
Sure. Absolutely. Now, being somebody who was raised in a Christian household, you'll understand this question more than probably other people who dabble in these things would. But a lot of the Christian perspective on like psychedelics and things like that is that there's this bad guy, there's this good guy. They're both mythical creatures, and the bad guy is trying to convince you to do these things that play with your mind and make you think that things are good that really aren't. Do you have any bearing on that? Do you give that any credibility at all? Do you ever think, maybe I shouldn't be doing this? Maybe this is opening up, parts of my brain that aren't supposed to be opened up?
No, I think that I try to listen to the little voice inside of me, the thing that like says, I don't know, like my moral compass, or like my, whatever it is.
That's the devil, brother. I'm sorry.
Yeah, the devil's inside you. Yeah. I just, I sort of believe that, like, I just try and listen to like my conscious, and just go with what I feel is right and the right thing to do. And I don't really pay much attention to anything else that's like coming from the outside that's telling me that something is good or bad. I think that I'm pretty good at discerning what's good or bad for myself, and if I make a mistake, I'll find out, and I'm willing to experiment. I'm willing to find out for myself. Yeah.
Yeah. Cool. Is it something that you're planning on doing again in the future? Do you set up times to do this, or is it just whenever you get vacation time, you go have a revelation?
Yeah. I mean, I do it quite a bit. I'm always trying to, and not in an abusive way, just more of in an educational way. I really
not an ayahuasca junkie or anything.
I think it would be pretty impossible to be an ayahuasca junkie. I mean,
if you got to go to Peru, it's pretty hard to get a habit.
You got to go to Peru. I mean, you can go to places in New York. You can go to places around the country that have these underground ayahuasca ceremonies. I personally wouldn't go. I wouldn't recommend going, to some, shaman named Bruce in Williamsburg. But, I think that, doing drugs, doing, whatever you're doing, if you're doing it in a responsible way with the right people, and you have knowledge and you have information beforehand, I mean, that's the best way that you can do it. I mean, just prepare and be responsible, and like, I think that, and be respectful too. It's like these are, you're fucking with your mind, like you're it's not like a toy, like it's very serious. So, yeah, I just try and do it whenever I feel like I need to sort of like maybe break through, or to just have like a experience. I mean, then the other thing is that like some of them are fun just to do recreationally too, and sometimes I'll do that. Like, it's a music festival season coming up, and I might go to one. I don't know. I mean, some people are trying to get me to go to like Burning Man. I've never been, but who knows? Maybe I'll go this year. I don't know.
Yeah. Now, I'm not like, I'm sure you run in different circles than people that do these things. I haven't. I'm not opposed to it or whatever. I just haven't. I've got a family and kids and a job and stuff. But is there, like, for people who do like the ayahuasca stuff, is there any kind of stigma for people who also do like the party drugs and just go out and have a good time? Is there like a separation there of two different camps, or is it pretty, mutual, whatever you can do to open your mind?
Man, I think it's just like definitely, it's just like wherever you go, it's like there's the same people there. You know, it's like there's virtue signaling people, moral superiority. You know, like,
Hmm.
well, you know, ayahuasca is so much better because it connects you with spirituality and the divine, and it, you know, oh, if you're just doing MDMA at a rave, like you're not really on the right, you know, path. And I
Right.
just don't buy into any of that stuff. I mean, it's like, you know, have fun, live your life, do what you feel like doing, or don't. You know, like you said, like
Hmm.
I'm not. You know, it's not for everyone. You know, it's like I just happened to. I never thought I would be doing this. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like 8 years ago, whatever. If you told me that I would be doing this, I'd be like, what? What are you talking about? Um, but it just kind of like happened. You know, it just kind of like fell into my lap. I just listened to the call and went down the path that was there. Um, but yeah, I mean, you know, everyone's always going to have their judgments. Everyone's always going to
Mhm.
like think that they're better than you because they do something in a different way, or their religious practice is better, their way of worship is better, their psychedelics are better, whatever they're, you know, it's all just a bunch of nonsense. You know, it's like, we're, you know, just be a good, decent human being, and you should be fine.
Right. Absolutely. So, uh, best trip stories, best acid, best LSD, best whatever. Share the most entertaining story you get.
Oh man. Wow, the most entertaining story I got. Well, that's a totally different thing than like the most profound story or anything. But
Give them both then.
all right, fuck it, why not? At the risk of embarrassing myself, I'll um, I'll tell this story about you know, so I had went to the Coachella Music Festival in 2012 with some friends, and that was my first time really at like a music festival. I thought it was really fun. So they decided to do like everybody, you know, we're going to go every year now. And I think it might have been the next year. And by the next year, like from 2012 to 2013, I had really been on this like psychedelic bandwagon and just been like, wow, like I'm just, you know, I'm really happening, man, because I'm just like experimenting with all kinds of stuff all the time. You know,
Right.
I had been listening to Terrence McKenna talk about, and for those of you who don't know, Terrence McKenna is ethnobotanist, and his brother Dennis McKenna as well. And Terrence is dead now, but he's got a plethora of talks on YouTube where you can go listen to him talk about mushrooms and DMT and everything. And he talks about doing this thing called a heroic dose. And a heroic dose is like usually typically with mushrooms, where you take 5 dried grams of mushrooms and you eat them in silent darkness. That was his prescription. That was his like test of, you know, you want to do these things, you want to see some you want to go somewhere.
You call
And
yourself a man. Here's the edge of death. Go find out.
exactly. And you know, I was like, all right, well, you know, I think I'm ready to do this. You know, I think I'm going to do this thing. And so what I didn't do was I didn't do it really in the right way. I was at a fucking music festival like an idiot.
Jeez.
And yeah, and
Not a silent dark room.
not a
Hero
silent dark
dose in
room.
public, right?
Yeah, in public, right? So and on top of that, I actually had so I had decided that I was handling psychedelics very well, right? Like I had a whole year of experience. I'm like, wow, I'm really handling this well. And I had sort of developed this kind of reputation where people were sort of expecting me to be this like crazy psychedelic guy or whatever, you know, like especially my friends who I was seeing for the first time in California after a year. And I had we had gone through the festival Friday, Saturday, and you know we've done our partying and our music and our dancing and all that stuff. And by Sunday the last day, I had decided that I was going to do pretty much everything under the sun. And I I had decided to take 5 grams of mushrooms, 2 tabs of LSD, and a couple pails of MDMA. Do not do this. Please do not. Nobody do this. This is not.
Spoiler alert, this is
Yeah,
not going to go
this
well.
is not going to go well. Okay. I had met this. I had broken off from my friends. I don't know where the hell they were. We'll find out where they were later. But I had gone to Arcade Fire to go see them play, which was fantastic. I mean, I felt like I was, you know, in like God's eyeball, like while he was like watching out on the world, and like I was like, whoa, this is crazy. And Arcade Fire was playing. I was like in the first row. I had met this girl. I don't know what I was saying to her. I was talking in a different language. She probably thought I was insane. Um, I slowly started to like take articles of clothing off. Right? Like this is sort of a typical thing that happens, right? Like
Sure.
in psychedelic, and when people freak out on psychedelics. And
was anybody surprised you were at an Arcade Fire show? You know?
Yeah, Arcade Fire, man. Yeah. So I had basically, like, I don't really remember exactly what had happened, but basically I started taking off all my clothes and running around screaming, "We are all animals. We're nothing but animals." and one of my friends found me, was like, "Holy shit, dude, like what the fuck is going on?" He like tackled me.
Were you on all fours or were you up on two
I
legs?
was running around just like naked, like in the middle. Yeah. And so, you know, thankfully, like I didn't catch attention of security or anything, but like tons of people were like, "Holy shit, this guy's naked. Like he's running around." Like, all right.
Just in case anybody was wondering, the size of the audience there, the security didn't notice the man running around naked screaming, "We are all animals."
No, they didn't, because the size of the audience there is probably about 100,000 people.
Right.
So, and everybody's whacked out of their mind. It's like the last day of the festival. So some people are like, "Hell yeah," like cheering me on. Some people were just like,
"Hell yeah, we are all animals. Everyone take your clothes off."
Like, right on, dude. Anyway, my friend
this guy gets it.
My friend actually, yeah, he's like, "This guy's deep, man." My friend actually managed to find me like fairly quickly, tackled me, forced me to like put my clothes back on. And I surprisingly like went along with it and was like, "Okay, great." So I'm like, where's our other friends? Like, we don't know. Okay. We don't know where these guys are. Well, the festival is ending. He's like, "All right, let's go back to the hotel." We had walked back to our hotel. I had sort of calmed down when I got there. I walk into the hotel. A bunch of my friends are just sitting in the bedrooms at the hotel watching Game of Thrones. Because
were they on anything?
They were on
just
nothing.
Chilling.
they had kind of like had enough of the festival. They were like, "Screw this thing, we're out of here."
You guys want to go to Coachella and watch Game of Thrones?
Yeah. So they're like, "We cannot miss Game of Thrones. This is the best show on television. We need to be there watching it."
That's commitment right there.
Yeah, I was shocked. I walked in. I was like, "What are you losers doing? Like, come on, man! Like, it's music time. Like, we got to party." And they were like, "Shut up! We're watching Game of Thrones." And it was the episode, spoiler alert, it was the episode where Joffrey had drank in this, like, I don't know if you watch the show, but like the kid drinks this like wine and dies. And I had seen this on the television, this child dying. And I'm like, "Holy shit." It was way too much for me to handle. Clothes off again, down the hallway of the hotel. "We're all gonna die.
I'm not going down like this, man."
Everyone's gonna die. Yeah, everyone's gonna die. We're all gonna die. People who weren't even going to the festival, like old women and like couples, like coming out of the room, they're like, "What the hell's going on?" My friends are chasing me. They can't catch me. I'm running up and down every floor, just like banging on doors. "Everyone's gonna die. We're all gonna die." And I'm naked again. Anyway, they managed to like subdue me. Thankfully, we didn't get in trouble. They brought me back to the room, put me in a shower. But the moral of the story is,
whatever that was, don't do that.
Don't do that. Do
Right.
not do that. That's not what you're supposed to do. So these things are very powerful, and you need to have respect for them. And I did not at that point, but I live to tell the tale about it. Live and learn, you know.
Well, I'm glad. Now, with these types of substances, is there any kind of like hangover process? Like, could you remember what you had done the night before? And like, was it there and fuzzy, or is it just like blackout? And is there any kind of repercussions the next day from that?
Yeah, no, I totally remembered everything that happened. You know, during when it was happening, I didn't really remember. Like, I wasn't consciously like aware of what was going on, because I felt like I was in a different universe, you know.
You didn't like put the pieces together and come to the logical conclusion that we're all animals and I need to take my clothes off, right?
Yeah, I wasn't like, "Now wait a second, we do have hair and we are mammals.
Right.
Why are we wearing these fabrics? Well, this is logically inaccurate." Yeah, no, yeah, I definitely remembered, and I definitely felt really embarrassed, and I was like, "Well, that was really stupid." And you know, again, it's just like I had gotten to this point where like I was like in this kind of like macho like headspace of like, well, I've taken so much stuff that I can handle it. You know, man,
I'm Mikeadelic. I'm the guy. I can do this. Everybody's expecting me to, so let's do it.
Yeah, it's just foolish. It's just so foolish. So yeah, I mean, but as far as like hangover or anything, I mean, it was basically just like I felt tired and kind of worn out. I mean,
Which you would
you
from
would, yeah.
doing that, even if you were totally sober.
And your brain is just, you're releasing. I mean, you're at the end of the day, it's like you're putting a substance into your body or substances into your body that are interacting with the chemicals in your body to produce a certain kind of effect, serotonin release, dopamine release. So you get sort of like depleted from that kind of stuff. So you need to rest and like recover and, drink a lot of kale or whatever.
Right. Sure. So would you're after that story, you might be seen as not the best proponent of psychedelics.
Yeah.
Even as a guy who has a psychedelic podcast. But
Right.
do you want to give your most profound story so we can end this on a bit of a higher note?
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So that story that I just told was like, I don't know, 7 years ago or something.
Mhm.
So I've come a long way since then. But yeah, I had an ayahuasca experience that was very powerful. It was there's a lot of people talk in sort of like these spiritual communities or Buddhist circles about something called like a Kundalini awakening, which is apparently something that like provides you with a whole new sort of like way of looking at the world, a whole new perspective, this awakening experience. And I definitely had that. I had that happen in a ceremony. It was really profound. I had drank ayahuasca. This was the last year that I was there as a guest, and I had a moment where I just evaporated like into nothing, and I was just this like sort of like ball of energy that was emitting like light out of it.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden, like in front of me, I had just seen these two like images. One was of Jesus, and the other one was of Buddha, and they had sort of like come into the frame and like merged into one, and then like came into the center of myself. And during this whole experience, I had felt like the most pleasurable experience that I've ever felt in my life. It was a high unlike any other high. I had felt like I had connected with all that ever was and will be. And, I felt like I wasn't even me, like I wasn't a person anymore. I was just like this sort of like energetic ball of unhoused consciousness or whatever. And it was very profound. I had this experience, and the next day at the ayahuasca center, like I was a little depressed, like I was a little down because I was like, wow, that was so amazing, that was so great, and I don't even know what to do now. That was just such an amazing experience. And other people who were there was about 20 other people in the room, and this woman that was sitting next to me said, yeah, I turned over. I felt this like light, like hitting my head. I turned over and I just saw like a ball of white light, like where you were. And I was like, okay, like, give me a break. Are you kidding me? Like you saw that? Because that's what I felt like. All right. So that's weird.
Mm-hmm.
Then another woman said, yeah, I felt like you had came to me in ceremony last night and helped me. And I said, okay, well, that's interesting, because when I was having this experience last night, I felt so much compassion and love for everyone in the room. And, when you go to these retreats, these people, they come around and they sit in a circle and they tell you why they're there. Like, these particular women who maybe have gone through, traumas in their life where they were molested or raped or beaten, or they've had just like serious, problems in their lives. And they share these experiences with you. And they're like, this is why I'm here, to get some healing for this. And it's like, when I was going through this experience, I just felt so much like love and connection with everyone in the room. And I was like, I just hope everybody gets the help that they need, just to be the best person they can be. And I sort of extended that from my heart space, like, to these people. And, like when you're talking like this, when you're saying stuff like that, it doesn't really like make sense, right? It's like, well, what does that even mean? I don't know.
Justice.
Yeah, I have no idea. I have no idea
Right.
what it means. It just means that like I felt something and I was just going with it. And then these people the next day were like confirming that for me. And this other woman said like, yeah, and I felt like there was another like shaman in the room. Like I heard someone, singing or something. And I had been singing a song I didn't even know. I was like singing in another language, which actually later I found out, a friend handed me a book. I was singing a Sanskrit song from my friend handed me this book called the secret origins of the like the secret origins of life, or the flower of life, something like that. I forget what it was. And I've been reading it, and then I would turn to like the page 10, and I was like, holy shit, like this is that language that I was singing. So I was singing another language. It turned out to be Sanskrit. I didn't know at the time. I had become this white ball of light that apparently other people witnessed as well. And I had seen the images of Jesus Christ and of the Buddha. And I had felt this ecstatic connection, like this divine, mystical, transcendent like power inside of me. It was epic, man. I mean, that was the turning point for me. That was the decision why I decided like to go back and work with ayahuasca. That was the decision that I decided to like start to walk like a different path in my life and like clean up some things. And so it was really, really profound. It was very spiritual. I mean, it was, I could even say that like I encountered God, you know. I felt like, you know, I had come in touch with the divine realm, and I saw it, and I knew it, and I felt it, and it was extremely powerful, and it really transformed me. I mean, it made me a different person, and it was just like the most moving experience in my life.
Yeah, that's very cool. That's crazy stuff. And that was actually another thing that I meant to ask you. We had a guy on back in, I think, episode 37. His name's Truth Sika. He's a rapper. Truth Sika is a rapper. And he's into the psychedelics and everything. And he had done the hero dose of mushrooms in a much better environment, and much more controlled environment. But he said that, you know, he's had these experiences where he'll do it with friends, and they like, he'll have these visions, and then they're like, yeah, I'm seeing the same thing, like at the same time. Like, is that something that happens often?
No, it definitely doesn't happen often, but I have heard of that happening before. And so when this happened under the influence of ayahuasca, it was just another sort of like check mark in the box of like, yeah, that can happen. You know, Bill Hicks, comedian Bill Hicks, had a mushroom experience that he talks about in a documentary. I think I saw it on Netflix. It was a documentary about Bill Hicks. It was really good. Documentary about Bill Hicks. And I love Bill Hicks. I think he's, you know, one of the greatest sort of like truth-telling comedians of our time. And he talks about having this mushroom experience with him and his friends, where they had saw this like spacecraft, and they all like got in, and like, you know, something like they told him the truth of the universe or whatever. And, you know, everything is love, or whatever the message was, I forget. But yeah, he had that experience too. So, you know, this can definitely happen. And I've had experience.
He's not the most touchy-feely, lovey person either, if you've ever listened to his comedy.
No, he's definitely not. And you don't have to be, you know, I mean,
right.
you don't have to be for these things to happen to you. I mean, they just happen to random people. Like, you know, I was like an angry, cynical son of a bitch, you know, for a long portion of my life. And so, you know, for me to be talking in the way that I'm talking now is like a complete and drastic change from how it used to be. But yeah, I mean, these sorts of things definitely can happen. I had an experience in LSD where like me and a friend were just like, we were staring at this like lake, and then all of a sudden, like, he was like, yeah. And I was like, what? I was like, yeah. He's like, okay, like we just communicated telepathically. Like that literally just happened. And that's, there's some truth to that, because when LSD was first invented, it was actually categorized as something called telepathy. And that's why the CIA was interested in it. They thought that it could be used as like a truth serum, where, you know, there's I think there was a book written about it and a movie made called like The Men Who Stare at Goats. And there's also a great movie. There's a great documentary on Netflix right now called Wormwood about the CIA and LSD too. So yeah, I mean, it's some powerful, weird, and wacky stuff.
Absolutely, man. That's awesome. What do you got going on right now? Like, what are you working on since you've been back?
Since I've been back, I've been just kind of doing a lot of like bullshit. Like, I've been trying to take care of like just moving things and storing
stupid podcasts that you're going on, right?
Oh no. No. I mean, you know, before I hopped on here, I was telling you I was like running errands and doing stuff. It's like a lot of like administrative things that I have to,
regular
like,
day life
catching up on emails and getting stuff out of storage and moving things and visiting friends and family. that kind of nonsense. But no, this is great. I mean, I love doing this. I love podcasting. I love talking with other people. Yeah, I mean, I have some podcasts lined up for myself. I'm going to be probably doing more of like a storytelling type of podcast for, recounting my trip, my journey. And I'll put that out on my show, Mikeadelic. And then, yeah, I'm probably going to be going back in July. I'm going to be doing some work for them over there. So I'm going to try and get as many podcasts out as I can, maybe make a couple of videos, do some writing, do a hell of a lot of reading and educating myself more. I always like to do that. So that's pretty much what I got lined up. And then also just enjoying my time back in the States, man. I just, want to go see a baseball game and just like hang out and
right.
Enjoy like a pizza and a hot dog.
Sure, it's New York. You got to.
Yeah.
So yeah, tell everybody where they can find out more information about you, all the stuff that you're working on, the Mikeadelic podcast, and anything else that you have.
Yeah, thanks, Dan. Yeah, you can go check out my podcast. It's called Mikeadelic, Mikeadelic. It's available everywhere: iTunes, YouTube, Spotify, Google Play, Stitcher, SoundCloud, wherever you want to get podcasts from. I do like sort of like solo shows where I tell stories or I just talk about, ranting and raving about whatever I feel passionate about. And then I also have some guests on as well. I have like a YouTube channel. You can find me, Mike. It's either Mike Brank or Mike Brancatelli. I don't know. I've shortened my name. Like I gave myself the Ellis Island treatment. So, yeah, it's MikeBranc, and that's also the name of my website. You just go to MikeBrank.com. I'm Mike Brank on Twitter, on Instagram. And I have a Instagram handle for my podcast, Mikeadelic_podcast. What else? I got a Patreon page as well. If you don't mind, I can plug that. It's
absolutely.
Yeah, it's patreon.com/MikeBranc, MikeBranc. And it's great. I mean, I don't do any ads for my show, and people donate, and then I have like some rewards and stuff. You get a free T-shirt or something, if you donate. So I got to actually take care of that. I've been away for so long, and I've been out of like internet connection that I haven't been able to keep up with all these things. But yeah, find me, search me out, and message me. One of the things I love the most is just like getting questions from people and getting, like I'm sure a lot of people probably will have a lot of questions about like a lot of the things that I talked about, like psychedelics and ayahuasca and what the hell is this crazy lunatic talking about. So just feel free to message me. I'm always down to just chat and have a dialogue about it. Yeah.
Absolutely, yeah, and send me all the links that you want. I'll include them all in the show notes and show description, and highly encourage everybody to check them out. Your show's great. Everything is very fascinating stuff that I would love to dig into more someday. And by someday, I mean like the actual trying stuff. I'm digging into it now as far as listening to your stuff and having you on the show. And it's been an absolute pleasure speaking with you, man. I'd love to have you on again to talk in the future.
Thanks a lot, Dan. Yeah, this has been great, man. I always like talking to a fellow liberty-loving patriots. So thanks for having me on. And let's do it again sometime.
Absolutely. Take care.
Take care.
Hey guys, thanks for sticking around to the end. I hope you enjoyed it as much as I did and always do. Let me know what you think. Let me know what you think about the topic. Do you think that this stuff should still be illegal because it's dangerous, or do you have arguments against some of the stuff that Mike Brancatelli proposed here and proposes on his podcast? If you're watching this podcast as a video on YouTube or wherever, you can leave a comment. Let me know what you think in the comment section down below. And if you're a regular just audio podcast listener, one of the normies, you can head over to the System Is Down forum, which you can find by going to tsidpod.com/forum and signing up for totally free. It's a place where a bunch of weirdos like yourself get together and talk about all the strange things in the world, with conspiracies, politics, religion, and just whatever strangeness comes up. You'll like it. Everybody's friendly, and it's one of the most civil groups I've ever seen in the existence of Facebook. It's amazing. You guys are amazing. So go join that, tsidpod.com/forum. Also, again, if you haven't already joined the Downers Club, then you're doing yourself and the show a great disservice. You could be a part of this show. You can. This show is here for your free entertainment right now. You can get a bunch more of it for less than a cup of coffee a month. cup of coffee a month. Think about it. $5 is the starting amount that you can sign up for, and you can sign up for higher levels and get greater incentives like merch, and you can join the Downers Club forum and all that stuff. So get over there, tsidpod.com/support, and join the Downers Club. You will not regret it. And if you do, if you sign up for $5 and you try it for a month and you hate it, you leave. There's no standing agreement that you have to stay. We've had people come and go, and some have left and returned. It's a fun place, and you're not going to regret it. I guarantee you, you're not going to want to leave. The people that did, they're just they're confused. They're still figuring their life out. Oh, and I almost forgot. I got to give a big shout out to the latest joiner of the Downers Club, Lucas Riley. He is one of the 3 hosts of the podcast 29 Toes. If you like listening to guys drink and talk about guy stuff, movies and games and drunken experiences, then go check out their podcast, 29 Toes. It's a fun, nonsensical listen, and Lucas, thank you for joining the Downers Club. There's your free plug. Anyway, of course, I want to remind you guys to go like the show on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, all that stuff. Subscribe. Click the little bell on YouTube if it's there, or subscribe, whatever works for you. It's totally fine. Do all the millennial stuff. Go over to iTunes and leave us a fun, happy review, maybe 5 stars or more if they'll allow it. And let everybody on iTunes know how strongly you feel about the show, positively or negatively. Let people know what they're getting into. Either warn people that it's too ridiculous, or let them know that it's fun and ridiculous. It's fun, comfortable content. And thank you guys so much for listening. And like I always say, most importantly this week, go out and talk to somebody that you disagree with. Maybe talk about mushrooms. Maybe talk about ayahuasca. Bring up some of the new information that you've learned here today. Let's figure out why this stuff is illegal and what people think. Just have civil conversations with people to their faces. Conversation is a dead art, completely dead, and let's revive it. Let's change the world by just speaking and listening, mostly listening, and not getting mad at people that we disagree with. I know it's almost impossible, or seemingly impossible in today's climate, but I've got faith in you. I think you can do it. It's not hard. Get out there. Make it happen. But yeah, also just tell somebody about the show this week. I'd greatly appreciate that. Let's keep building this thing. Let's keep making it bigger and better and more fun for you and your viewing and listening pleasure. Do all that, and of course, I'll be back here first thing next Monday morning with some more uncomfortable content for your ears. Until then, ladies and gentlemen, question everything and stand comfortable. Thanks. This has been a Goulash Media production. goulashmedia.net.
This concludes our broadcast day. Click.